Hello everyone. So today would be the next lecture in the second series of public administration concept that we were talking about yesterday. And today it will be obviously more broad-based, fine, more technical in nature. So you'll have to gear up for that. Fine. I hope you are doing well. So let us start today. We were more concerned about the origin, the definition and scope, and why there are several interpretations of public administration. Right. Now, the biggest problem with public administration is that you can say it has nothing of its own. Right? It has borrowed most of the things from various disciplines. And why did it happen? the bottom line, the biggest issue for that is that public administration has always been fine, an activity-oriented endeavor. It has always wanted to understand how to do things better, right? And that is also one of the main reasons that public administration is evolving discipline, and probably it has never evolved, and probably it never will be. Fine. There are some contemporary scholars like Donald F. Kettle, right? Ingraham, right? Donahue, Corbin, Stevers, and all those scholars have tried to, like, you can just have a look at the names like Corbin, Donald F. Kettle, right? Donahue, Ingraham, right? Stevers. So why they have these people, and along with that, there are so many other scholars, right? So they have what they have tried to say. They are trying to say that public administration is more of a socially conscious discipline. In fact, some people have predicted for the end of public administration, right? The public administration would no more be relevant to the societies, especially in the aftermath of globalization, right? But reality is that has never happened. In fact, public administration has adapted itself like the coronavirus right now, fine, and it has mutated itself into various forms, which obviously nobody can understand, right? At least theoretically. In terms of practical application, public administration obviously has been the counterpart of the society and its evolutionary process, right? Since the beginning. In fact, I would say it preceded the evolution of society. If you go back and find out, read about the Mohenjo-daro, the Harappa, okay, they were very civilized, they were very evolved societies, and they had a huge administrative structure, right? So the administrative structure led to the emergence of a civilization, right? Or the civilization led to the emergence of an administrative structure, still is debatable, right? There are scholars who have said that bureaucracy is part of our bones, right? Okay, everything. When you excavate, go back and excavate thousands and thousands of years back of the human civilization, you'll find that public administration existed in some form or the other. At least an administrative system was in place always, right? So keeping in tune with those discussions, now there have been various interpretations over the time of public administration. As a subject, we have tried to confine it to the study of the executive branch, that is the administration, right? But in reality, this is not true. Okay, this was a very traditional definition of public. Okay, so let us start with some initial debates, initial ideas related to the origin of public administration. Now, when we talk about the origin, you have to understand this in two parts. One, when we talk about the theory, right, the subject, what we study, fine, what is our area of, like, in Nicholas Henry's terms, if we'll talk about it over the time. So Nicholas Henry uses the term the focus. Focus, we say, is the analytical target. Analytical target means let us say you want to become an engineer. So obviously there will be subject that you'll study to become an engineer. You may learn things, no doubt, but you need to have a degree. You need to have a theoretical understanding of certain topics. Okay, there must be a subject matter. That subject matter is your analytical target. Fine. But in terms of, let us say, the activity, in terms of the actions that the society performs, the political system does, the necessary human actions needed for the survival and the emergence of societies, fine, this has a very long history. This is very new. This is much older in the sense it is obviously in tune with the civilization, right? So from nomads to a settled life, and then going for agriculture, farming, okay, animal husbandry, and all those things. Obviously, the activity of administration is part and parcel of human civilization, right? So if we say the theory part, we are more concerned with this. If you see your syllabus, so your syllabus paper 1, okay, the first unit talks about the evolution of PubAd, the meaning, scope, the origins of public administration. Now, if we want to interpret this topic in a very narrow sense, right, we can go and study the definition of certain scholars, fine, 𝗂𝐨𝐻𝐿𝐴, Simon, Wilson, Waldo, even Weber, Pfiffner, Prestes, L.D. White, and all those. There's so many scholars are there, right? So you can go and study them and understand them in a very narrow perspective, right? But when you think of a broader perspective, right, that what is the origin of this subject, right? How do we interpret the origin of the subject? So we can bifurcate this origin of the discipline, right? The compilation of the knowledge. Whereas you can say the knowledge was there but never compiled. The knowledge was more hands-on knowledge. The knowledge was more heuristic knowledge, the trial and error knowledge, which was always there, but it was never compiled, right? So when we talk about this compilation, then we can go to the non-Western tradition, right? And we can go to the Western tradition. Now, all of you know that the printing press was developed in Europe, right? The Industrial Revolution took place there. The literature was published first. It was more handy to carry a book than the big manuscripts that the non-Western traditions, or because they were not basically industrialized, right? So this tradition dominated the study of public administration, right? Whereas a lot of literature is available in this tradition also. For example, if you talk about the Charvak, okay, the Charvak tradition, right, of administration, of dealing with the administrative problems, okay, that is a totally detailed study. Charvak philosophy, fine, you read about that in the philosophy also, in ethics also. So if you talk about this, if you talk about 𝗵𝐻𝐵𝐻𝐵𝐻𝐵, who was, though for the rational people it might seem to be more mythological, but when you think of the Charvak tradition or the 𝗵𝐻𝐵𝐻𝐵, right, they have talked about detail. If you talk about Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, if you read them with respect to that, they have talked about in detail, right, what is the extent of public administration, what kind of administrative activity was involved, how to deal with the day-to-day problems and all. Fine. So even that tradition is very dominant. Kautilya comes quite late, right? But yes, Kautilya is a dominant non-Western philosopher. Though people have debated whether he's a philosopher or he's more of a realist, he's more of just a practical, you can say a person who's applying practical knowledge to the understanding of day-to-day administrative problems. But yes, if you read him properly between the lines, you'll understand he was more of a philosopher because he was a realist, no doubt about it. But calling him realist would be more of a criticism. As a philosopher, and he was more concerned with developing those mechanisms based on certain concepts, based on certain understanding of human behavior, right? That how we can govern the human behavior, what will be the official behavior, how the officials are going to behave, and what could be the adequate, legitimate means to control them, right? But yes, his focus was more on controlling, on the exercise of power, right? But he's also very popular, right? In the Western tradition, we can divide this entire study fine, into two parts now. One coming from the European continental, that is the French and Germanic tradition. Fine, so we can just remove all this. Western traditions have already or always dominated, no doubt. They have been forerunners in terms of knowledge and its propagation throughout the world, right? So when we think of Western tradition, right, in terms of Western tradition, we have a Francophone tradition, and one we have the Anglophone tradition. Now this we can call as the continental, right, or French Germanic. Continental or French Germanic, this you can call as the Anglo-Saxon, mostly dominant in US and Europe. Now they have a very big impact in terms of the historical developments that happened there. Find how their society was shaped into its present form. What were the events which led to such kind of emergence of, classes, the Industrial Revolution, the royalty, okay, the monarchies dismantling into democracies or benevolent democracies, and then probably the upsurge, the social revolutions, the mass revolutions leading to all this. So they have specific history and background, right, without which you cannot actually understand the need for that kind of administrative structure. For example, Weber comes from this tradition, right? Wilson comes from this tradition. So when you see their language as an author, as a theorist, when you see their language, fine, when you see the vocabulary they are using, when you see the interpretation of power they are making, because power is basically central to the study of public administration. So when you think of the definitions, the vocabulary, the entire gamut of, the concept that they built around the study of administration, it smells, okay, from their own origins. It smells from their own culture, their kitchen, their life, okay, their markets, okay, their economic activity, their entire existence as a being, fine, is all reflected in this, fine. So you can say these are two ideal frameworks, fine. They are like an ideological framework, okay, in which people of different traditions, various scholars of different traditions have viewed what administration is in both aspects, as an activity, as a subject both, right? Which preceded first, this is again debatable, because activity has always preceded the subject, fine. But yes, the subject once developed, and it has a resilience of research, it has the support, the confirmation, the legitimacy of extensive study, case studies, data, facts, then obviously the knowledge will also shape the activity. It happens both way, fine. So research and the real administration go hand in hand. So these are two major traditions. Now in this tradition, okay, we'll talk about it over the time in detail. In this tradition, there was more focus on the stability. The stability of administration, the strength of administration as a very important organization or an institution in the society, fine. In this tradition, the more focus was on, well, I would not say it was on instability, it was on stability, but here the more focus was on the society, right? The more focus was on the populism, the people. So see, here the stability was desired even at the cost of control, right? That if there is a control, we'll exercise the control, but we'll make things stable. The administration needs to have more power in order to control the society, right? Whereas here, the society's dynamism were viewed more liberally, and administration was given a secondary role to play as per the whims and fancies of the society. So here, the administration becomes more of an agent serving the society. Here, the administration becomes more of the leader, leading the society. So both have different conceptions, and that is what gave rise to one tradition of 𝗑𝐻𝑎d, another tradition of 𝗑𝐻𝑎d. Now, it is obvious that when we compare this tradition, okay, there is a very famous person, okay, Lawrence von Steen. Lawrence von Steen was one of the first persons, probably 1855, right? He was the first person to think of that there must be an administrative study. In fact, the movement for administrative reform, civil services reform, okay, civil services examinations, and developing a civil services structure on the basis of you can say a well thought of knowledge, okay, a researched understanding, providing practical inputs to the administrative structure, okay, was developed, okay, in the beginning of the 19th century somewhere, okay, in the form of the cameralist movement, right? In France and Germany, mostly dominated in France. But this cameralist movement, France and Germany, it was quite, it in fact impacted the entire Europe in that form. Though the UK, because obviously it has a different structure and it was more liberal compared to these two as a society, right? If you know about the evolution of the British monarchy, you'll understand, talking about Magna Carta, Charter of Rights, okay, and and likewise, so they had a very developed liberal understanding, right? So the cameralist movement, the von Steen, is the parallel to something known as Wilson, or somebody referred to as the father of public administration, Wilson. So von Steen is the dominant architect of the Francophone tradition of the study of public administration, and Wilson becomes the architect of the Anglophone tradition, even though it was not merely the Wilson. Okay, there were a lot of people prior to Wilson who have contributed, but they never visualized an organized field of study known as administration, right? But all said and done, this is more of the origin part, as a theory, as a subject from where it originated, right? But we cannot totally rule out the here and there contributions, right? There were so many other people, okay, coming from different, totally different scenario. Okay, they were neither politicians, they were neither administrators, they were neither part of the political system. Fine, they were coming from the economics background. They were basically industrialists. Okay, they were basically engineers, technocrats. They have also contributed to the development of public administration in both the traditions, not just one. 𝗂𝐻𝑎d comes from technically the Francophone tradition, fine. Whereas you can say 𝗂𝐨𝐼𝐴 and 𝗂𝐻𝑎d, they come from the Anglophone tradition. So they have also added to it over the time, right? And their contribution cannot be neglected in terms of understanding of the subject, right? So let us say that this is the entire scenario, how it evolved, fine. Their specific focus was the administrative, okay, their specific focus was the administrative, you can say, stability in the sense of making administration more powerful in the society, making administration more stronger compared to other organs of the state. Why? Because they were quite averse to politicization, right? They had witnessed a lot of bloodshed, a lot of conflicts, and likewise centralization of power was a key feature here, right? So they wanted to centralize power, but not to exploit, obviously, but to restore the stability and sanity in the society. Whereas these people, they were coming from different tradition. There was a revolution, fine, and they acquired democracy. So they wanted to preserve these values of democracy, right? So you can understand there have been different ideologies pushing these two developments, parallel developments, fine. Why this became more popular, why we study this. So as an aspirant of public administration on UPSC aspirant, studying public administration, why we are dominated by this? Because obviously we are more into the study of administration in the you can say the doctrinal, the romantic, the ideological framework of democracy, right? We believe that democracy is, be it and all it of the human evolution, of the political evolution. So we believe that democracy is eventually what we desire, eventually what will be the most evolved form of a liberal society. A society where participation, fine, where inclusion, where disparities would be removed, and where egalitarianism, where justice would become as the buzzword of governing. Right? That is what we desire. So this becomes a more doctrinal, more romantic, more ideological conception. Okay, even though this is more desirable, no doubt. Okay, whereas this is more about the stability, the realism, the territorial integrity. It's more about discipline. It's more about making people contribute in terms of duties, not in terms of just rights. Like here we have more of rights, less of duties. Here we have the rights compatible only with duties. Fine. There's no concept of rights here without duties. Fine. So there is an element of restoration and control here. Fine. There is an element, in fact, quite an element of freedom and liberty here. Right. So you can say that these are the logical framework in which we have to understand how we evolve. So as UPSC aspirants, we are more concerned with this because that is more democratic conception of public administration. And ultimately, public administration is believed to be serving the democracy. And that is what the raison d'etre, that is what their reason for existence is. Right? So let us say now, move forward. So these were two dominant traditions, how the theory evolved, right? And because we study origin of PubAd, okay, aspects of PubAd, now we say scope of PubAd, right? So if you see your syllabus, now if I think of scope, again I have to think of scope in terms of activity, in terms of subject, in terms of the organizations. So let us say, how do I perceive this word public administration? That is the next important aspect. First I have to perceive it, first I have to define it, first I have to understand its X, Y, Z dimensions, okay, and then only I can understand that, okay, what exactly is the scope of study, what should I study, how should I study, right? That is still a big issue. How should we study public administration? Okay. Is it a research, is it a science, it is an art, okay, it is more of emotions, behavior, values, or it is more of techniques, technology, structure, design, and there are so many aspects to that. So let us say if we think of PubAd, let us say one is the subject, right? Other is that we have to study subject. Other is that it is an organization, right, which performs certain functions in the society. What does administration do? Administration is to serve the democracy. Administration is to serve the political system. So if we take this, then we think of administration as a set of functions, okay, the activities that we do. Fine. Now see, this is a big issue. When we think of this, you have to understand it from the internal aspects and the external aspects, right? What are the goals and ambitions of administration, right? And here, what are its techniques, procedures, laws, right? So you can just simplify it by dividing. The activity ka matlab kya hai, that it revolves around two things. One, what are its ambitions, what are its goals, what are the goals set by the society and they have to strive for it. Another is that how they are actually going to do it. So they have to perform certain activities to achieve these goals, right? So what are those activities? Okay, how to do it, how to improve it, that is also an aspect of this, right? The another aspect in which we can visualize public administration, fine, is a part of social system. Now this is a very unique aspect of the study of public administration when we say it is part of social system, right? Now if I say America is the origin of public administration, the study of public administration, fine. So let us say subject, America, right? The bureaucracy, the administrative system, American, right? The goals of America, the procedures and techniques which are necessary to achieve these goals, fine. So you can understand they will be related. If my goals change, my techniques will also change. You start preparing for SSC exam X rather than UPSC or civil services. Will you not change your strategy? You will change it. Will you not change your tools? You'll change it. Will you not change your resources? You will change it. Fine. So, like different states dealing with the same problem in different manner, but there is a national strategy which has been made. So more or less, we tend to universalize it. Fine. So let us say America, there might be various differences in North America, South America, fine, in most of the hinterland of America, and more of the modern cities, like in New York and all those, and other cities which are not still conservative and not quite developed. Racial conflicts are there, and likewise. So they may have different strategies, but still we can, because it is one territory, it is more or less having a consensus, a value together. So we can, categorize them into, let's say, one set of activities, or at least, okay, a set of activities representing a one particular territory or a community, right? Now, when we come to this now, so if I say everything is American, right? So as an Indian, why should I study that? Because if and unless I distinguish India from America, fine, what I'm simply saying that what is their problem is our problem. Fine, what are their cultural issues are our cultural issues. What are conflicts in their society are the conflicts in our society, right? What are the ambitions? What are the goals which the society aspires for are our goals and aspirations. Is not true, right? So social structure, culture, civilization, okay, their evolution, their elements of civilization, they're very different, right? So this part of social system is a very unique dimension of public administration, which gives it, right, which gives it more narrow or contextual meaning. Okay, more ecological meaning. Ecological meaning would mean that there can be a public administration right? The administration in the meaning, the understanding of India as a society and America as a society, okay, heavily depends upon what are the differences in their cultures, in their norms, in their value system, in their social structure, in their evolution, fine? So unless we understand, we demarcate it, we cannot understand what exactly is the domain and scope of public administration, right? So you can say when we study paper one, when we study all the theories, we are basically studying it in a non-ecological perspective, in a non-contextual perspective, because we are studying what is American. And we are accepting it as it is and memorizing it, right? But when we think of, okay, customizing this knowledge for our need, right, in Indian context, then we have to redefine public administration. Then we have to question the knowledge that we have simply probably borrowed or studied from there. So paper one is more about your theoretical understanding of this aspect, fine. And when we take paper two, it is more about this aspect, fine. It distinguishes the Indian administration, the context of this knowledge, fine, the context of this knowledge in India. Fine, it differentiates the context of that knowledge in US, this knowledge in India. Fine. So you can understand it this way, that when we think of this entire scope of study, right, it gives a very interesting turn to the study of public administration. Fine. If we are simply mugging up the definitions, fine, that public administration is the action part of the government. Public affairs and prestige, public administration comprise of all those activities which are necessary to achieve the defined objectives of the government. Now, that is not the way to go about it, right? First, we have to draw a bigger canvas, right? And within that bigger canvas, now we have to identify the niche areas, right? So we'll continue this discussion, right? There are certain limits to our engagement right now, fine. So we'll continue this discussion tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll go much deeper into that, and we'll have a better viewpoint over the time as we go on, fine. And over the time, we have planned that we'll go for a Zoom meeting with you, all of you people who have any queries regarding public administration, who want to ask about what optional to choose, why to choose that optional, fine. I'll be sharing my own experiences and many experiences of people whom have been teaching since over the years and who've qualified with public administration. Fine. Anybody who has his own queries, okay, can also join that. Probably by 10th of June we'll do it, right? So we are doing it. We are putting up bit by bit. We are trying to build this the prodigy that we have created. Fine. It's more about the empathy, the education, the excellence, right? So we are doing it, and we will be doing it. Fine. So kindly be connected to us. Thanks a lot for your time, and I'm really obliged. Have a nice time. See you tomorrow. Bye.